Welcome to our Spring Refresh series. It's our second annual. We started this series last year and we had such great interest that we wanted to go ahead and offer it again this year. And yes, please keep those names and where you're from going in the chat. Today's webinar we're very excited about is Put the Freeze in Summer Melt. And in just a second, I'll give you a description and introduce our speakers today. First of all, my name is Tanya Bulette, and I'm the counseling coordinator for the San Diego County Office of Education. I want to let you all know that this workshop will be recorded and it will be posted on the SDCOE School Counselor website in about 2 to 3 days. So hopefully by early next week, you'll have a link to this webinar where you can go and revisit it over and over as much as you like. And we will also post their slide deck, so you'll have access to that as well. So again, the webinar for today is Put the Freeze in Summer Melt. This is a really hot topic right now, and I'm excited to introduce our two presenters from Helix High School, where they are doing this work and they're doing it really well. In this webinar, you're going to learn how to develop a program to assist high school graduates with completing college enrollment requirements for the fall semester after graduation. Our first presenter is a long-time friend of mine, Cathy Singer. She is the college access counselor at Helix High School. Cathy has been a school counselor for 21 years, 14 years as an academic counselor, and 7 years in her current position with College Access. She's also been, for 6 years, the dual enrollment coordinator. She's the director of the Helix Space program. And she was also an instructor at SDSU's School Counselor of Education program, where some of you in the room may have had her as an instructor. She's also been a math teacher for 10 years prior to becoming a school counselor. We brought her over because we knew where she needed to be. Also want to introduce Katie. She is the Summer Melt Director and Helix First Department Chair. Katie's education background, I love this, includes a master's in education with a focus on guidance and counseling, and a PPS credential and a CWA authorization. So glad to have another school counselor in the room. But she's been teaching Helix First, it's a ninth grade foundations course since 2014. She's also a part-time instructor for the counseling department at Cuyamaca, and she's teaching a dual enrollment course, Counseling 120 at Helix. She is also a long-term substitute school counselor at Helix, and she just can't get away from them, and they weren't going to let her go. So we're really excited to have both Cathy and Katie here today. And just so you know, they have the bell schedule happening as we speak. So if they go on mute all of a sudden, it's just because the bell is going off. And so anyways, once that goes off, they will join us. And so whenever you're ready, Cathy, please take it away.
Hi, thank everyone for joining us. We do want to talk about our Summer Melt program. So putting the freeze on Summer Melt. Summer Melt, if you're not familiar, is a term that was coined to address the issue of students who graduate from high school in the spring with the intention to enroll in college in the fall, but then for lots of many different reasons do not wind up enrolling in the fall. So they have melted away from their post-high school plans. And so we're looking to address that issue and support students during the summer after graduation to help them get enrolled in college. Nationwide, 10 to 40% of college attending high school seniors tend to melt, and 20 to 44% come from low income or underrepresented populations. So it's a big issue across the country, and we want to make sure that we're addressing it. As we know, education is a pathway to their futures, and we want to make sure they're continuing in whichever type of education they're choosing. Why do students melt? There's a lot of reasons that they face adversity after graduation. There's a lot of tasks and hoops to jump through when they get into college that they have to do before they can actually set foot in a classroom. And they haven't had to do those things before. In most high schools, they're done for them, or they're handheld through them, and now they're on their own and they're not really sure what to do, and they don't have anybody to turn to. So often with our first generation students, nobody at home has done this process. They're not familiar. And even if they are, they may not be familiar with what those processes are at this time. maybe they're not responding in a timely manner to their emails. There's just a lot of issues that go on that they just give up and decide it's not worth it and I'm not going to go anymore because I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. So providing support is a key. At Helix, we call our program SPACE. It stands for Summer Personalized Assistance for College Enrollment. Just to give it a little kitschy name and have something for them to refer to. And the whole purpose of that program was to reduce our summer melt. Our first year, we piloted the program. I was released from my June assignment for 1 day a week, and we used a lot of counseling interns that wanted to get hours over the summer. And then we were able to get some funding to continue the program once we were able to show our improvements. Our inspiration came from actually the 2015 NACAC. Although I'd been in education a long time and I'd been a counselor for quite a while, I'd never heard of summer melt until I attended that conference. And I was intrigued by it. As a former math teacher, I'm also kind of a data rat. So I started looking into things and I wanted to see if we could do something to address the issue. We got really lucky after that pilot program, and the state of California came out with their college readiness block grant. And at Helix, we got the grant, and then they developed an application process to get funding. So I was able to procure almost $230,000 for a 3-year program to get things up and running. So that was really exciting. Sorry, we got $230,000 from the state. I was able to get $28,000 for a 3-year program for planning purposes and then implementation through Helix's $230,000 grant. In the fall of 2020, when that grant was up, I submitted a proposal to the administration and they agreed to continue to fund the program on a lower scale basis. But we have still had the program every year except the summer of 2020. We did not have a program at all. We were all kind of thrown for a loop, as I'm sure most of you were, with the shutdown. But we did bring back a minimal virtual program in 2021. And this summer, we're excited to be up and running again. Our proposal included information. So some of the things that we needed to do was gather data from our postgraduates and what their intentions were, actually research the college enrollment. We have intake and exit surveys from our program. We have workshop information, and then feedback from the alumni are all things that we've used to propose to continue this program going. I usually get funded for about 2 years at a time, and then we have to re-propose it to our administration. This is our melt rate data, which the yellow represents pre-space program. The blue represents years that we actually had a program running. Then we've got 2020, our melt did go down significantly, and shockingly in 2021, we actually have 0% melt. Katie and I have a theory that our percentage of graduates saying that they were intending to go to college also went down significantly. So we believe that the students in their exit survey who said they were going to college were more focused and geared and had the supports to get there. As we've seen across the country, college enrollment has been down the last 2 years, and I think that's why our melt dropped. I don't think it was any magic thing that we've cured summer melt, but we're pretty happy with the 6% we attained in 2019 and feel like we can continue to bring that down. I don't know that we'll ever get to 0 like we did last summer, but that's kind of the data that we've collected through using the National Student Clearinghouse for our college enrollment data and our senior graduate exit surveys for their intentions. So that's where that data comes from. Do we have any questions so far?
Nope, I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now.
Getting ready. I think we're going to have a bell in a minute. So if I mute, that will be it. This is kind of, did I skip a slide? No, sorry. There we go. Sorry about that. This is some data from our actual program and the things that there we are. And the things that we do. So we have data on students who came in person, emails we've sent out, and we use Remind as a texting service that we send out text messages to the students. Again, we collect their personal emails as well as their personal cell phone numbers in our exit survey, because they lose access to their Helix school emails. So that's how we reach out to them. And we've definitely had years where we've been more participatory than others. And we've tried to debrief and rewrite our program for upcoming years. But that's kind of where we are as far as what we've done in our program data-wise. Our overall plan when our implementation was, first we developed a manual, and our manual helped us kind of focus and figure out what are our goals of the program, what do we hope to get out of it, and what will it take to reach those goals. And each year we come back to that manual when we're getting ready to start the program and help us to set ourselves up. There's things in there for training, staffing, and as well as what type of programs we want to run during the SPACE program. We learned we really need to focus on outreach and personal assistance, that just sending information en masse doesn't really get the students who are likely to fall through the cracks. They need more of a one-on-one outreach of a personal nature. Due to privacy concerns and overstepping bounds, we really try to stick with the emails and the remind text messages, because then it's not coming from anybody's personal accounts. Everything is set up. We have a special email for the Helix Space program and a remind account all set up to that Google account. And we use that. We devote days that are just outreach, where somebody is manning the email and responding to students, as well as sending things out and researching. We look at what colleges our students are going to and where they might need help in reminders. Then we have our devoted lab days where they can just pop in. And that's where we've also set up workshops when we have seen a lot of students are going to one specific college and that college's registration or orientation is coming up. We might offer a workshop specific to that college.
And Cathy, do you want to share the student population of Helix?
Sure. So we are approximately 2,400 students. We usually have around 500 to 550 graduates each year. Our student body makeup is about 46% Hispanic. I think we're 17% African American. I think we're 20-something% white, and then a mix of others. We do provide to a high percentage of low-income students. Honestly, I don't have our current data on that off the top of my head, but we're usually around 50 to 60%. What used to be free and reduced lunch when they filled out applications. So we do have a percentage of our population tends to fall into the percentage of students who are likely to melt over the summer. Hopefully that helps with that. Our students are graduating college bound. We have a very high percentage of A to G completers, but that doesn't mean that they're not needing supports. Also at our school, the counselors are busy right after graduation with the next year's plan. So our senior counselor now has the incoming 9th grade class, so they aren't able to respond to emails or support the students after graduation because they've been moved into their next group of students. So providing somebody else for the students to turn to is critical in our school setup. Tips to starting a program: first, gather your data. Make sure, one, you have a need, and if you do, what are those needs? Start small with a low cost to no cost, even if you're not dealing. So we only had 1 day a week that we offered the program that summer of 2016, and it was only for about 4 hours on that 1 day, but it was something, and it helped us to figure out what kids really needed, because they don't know what they don't know. And by collecting data through the program, we were able to have a better idea of what we needed to provide them and to support them. Then present your proposal to your administration and look for grants. There are a lot of them out there. And then staffing. You want staff that's really passionate about them, not people just looking for a summer job. We found that one summer we got people that are good workers, but they weren't really passionate about this job, and therefore it wasn't as positive of experience for our students, at least in the feedback they gave us. This is kind of how our program has developed over time. Like I said, in 2016, it had myself working 1 day a week, and then we had 5 counseling interns that worked 1 to 3 days a week. We got really lucky in some issues with our staffing that they wound up having some classified staff that owed a few weeks of work. And so they were assigned to us 4 half days. And that's where a lot of the outreach and things had happened. We used to run the program in June and July, and a much smaller program in July. 2017 is when we got funded. So that's when we were able to have a director, a daily supervisor, and 3 workers. In June, the workers usually just work on lab days, and the director and the daily supervisor do the outreach on outreach days. On lab days, well, I'll let Katie get into all of that. I'm stealing her presentation, but so this is just kind of a layout of how we've progressed over time. This summer, we've been granted a very minimal program, and so what we're looking at is 1 director and 3 workers for 7 days in June, and then having just 1 worker for 1 day a week in July to just monitor emails and respond to students. So we definitely have a much smaller program, but it was difficult to push for more when they saw that our melt rate went down so much with nothing to minimal. So we kind of have to build that back up if it's needed. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
Okay. So I'm going to go over just the logistics of putting the program together, and I did it in a month-by-month timeline, which hopefully will make it easy to understand. In the months of April and May, it's really important that you start building the brand awareness and name recognition with your seniors so that they know what the program is that is available to them. If you have a name for it, like we have the SPACE program, we teach them what that means and what that is going to offer them. Ways that we have advertised the program in the past are through classroom visits, going out into senior classes and actually meeting with the students, not one-on-one, but just doing presentations so they understand that this is something they may need, understand the name, and they know how to access the program. Emails that are sent just to the senior class are really helpful as well. At that time of the year, we can use their school email address, depending on how long they have access to it after they graduate. You can continue to use that if you want to. And then also having flyers or posters available at senior events. Really, it's just so that students understand the program is available and what it is. So when they see it pop up in their email, that they know, what that is that they're seeing and why they might need it, why it's relevant for them. Another thing you can do during that time is gather data about your graduates, figure out what sorts of needs they might have, where the majority of your students are going. That way you can be more strategic in actually implementing your program and put your resources where your needs are. At this time, also, depending on what your staffing situation looks like, hiring and recruiting and interviewing staff is really important. Not necessarily important to train them at that time, but getting those folks in and having time to actually vet some people that you might want to work with. Again, it depends on what your resources are going to look like for staffing. In June, before the program actually begins, you do want to train your staff. If it's counselors that are familiar with a lot of this stuff anyway, it's pretty much stuff they're doing on a regular basis. If you are bringing in interns or other types of individuals that can work as staff, we have on our campus academic coaches who are able to come in and work with students. They do need a little bit of training. I recommend training them on common themes that are going to probably come up. Financial aid is a really big one. How do students finish out the financial aid process? And then course planning is another really big one that students need, especially those going into the local community colleges where they are in charge of building a schedule for themselves. Teaching them about the GETZ, for instance, is really important. They don't know how to do it. They know they have a registration appointment and they, just log on and go, okay, now what? So that's something that the staff needs to know how to help them and guide them on. Also, part of training can be navigating specific websites. If the individuals haven't looked at a website like the local community colleges or even just regular colleges or financial websites, if they haven't seen those recently, it's just nice to get that familiarity so they have it ahead of time, so they're not learning it with the student right in front of them. Even though that's a good teachable moment for the student, it's better if they know a little bit about what to anticipate and how to direct them. And then also it's a good time to use the data you've collected and strategically plan your outreach based on your students' needs. We did an intake and an exit survey that we put together to gather data during those space program hours. So if that's something you would like in order to gather data to continue your program or just see how you're being used, that is something that you can put together at that time. We went with basic information such as, that's okay, who the student is, what they're there for, and what assistance they needed and what follow-up assistance they might need after they left us and their preferred method of contact. Again, before the program officially starts, this little window of time is not very big, but it is busy in those first few days before the program starts. Basically just taking all your data. As Cathy mentioned, we do an exit survey. So we have a lot of data about our students and just really breaking it down into subgroups are important. So we have our students headed to community colleges. We have our students headed to four-year colleges. We have students that in the past, I mean, now with the FAFSA becoming a graduation requirement, we won't see this as much, but we had students who had completed a FAFSA, students who hadn't completed a FAFSA. We have students who are not interested in college at all. And how can we support them as well in, you know, just even things like putting together a resume. So we just created subgroups, which is really nice because then we can send out strategic information. Because as we all know, if we get a lot of emails and it doesn't feel like it's relevant to us, we stop paying attention. So we reserve those emails for everybody, for things that are truly for everybody. Otherwise, we, you know, tailor it to the audience. Like I said before, basing your outreach on your data. So if you have a lot of students headed into the community college, that's where you want to spend the bulk of your outreach time. If you have a very small percentage that haven't filled out their FAFSA, you wouldn't spend as much time on that. It just depends on what your students' needs are, which can, you know, vary year to year. We did create a Remind 101 account. That's something that we utilized, and we would just send out messages. I didn't want to overwhelm the students just because, again, I didn't want them to block us and then not take advantage of what we were offering. But we would use it to say, you know, good morning, here are the lab hours for the day, or any important reminders. With Remind, you're sending it to everybody. So it has to be really strategic for everybody. And then prior to the program starting, we sent a welcome email that just reminded the kids what the program is offering them and when it's available, both through email and through lab hours. Then once the program actually opens in June, we had open lab hours where students could just walk in. This is a tricky time to staff just because you don't know how many students you're going to have coming in. So you have to do your best guess of how much it needs to be staffed. But this is really for kids to come in with whatever question they have and get their questions answered. If you know that you've got common needs and you have the resources available, you can offer workshops for students and advertise those workshops where if they need help with course planning, you have a workshop for that. If they need help with finishing any sort of financial aid, you can have a workshop for that. Whatever the students' needs are. Again, this is going to vary campus to campus and based on what resources you have available. If you have people that are working at the local schools that can come in and talk to your students, that is fantastic. We had one summer where one of our staff members was an ambassador at SDSU and was able to offer a workshop to our students that was very popular, where she went through a lot of information with them, but we only had her one summer. So it was only something we were able to offer once. Next. And then continuing that, the other part aside from the lab hours is just the outreach. Like I said before, you have class-wide announcements that are relevant to everybody who has graduated with that class. So important dates and reminders. Our students seem to really care about when their transcripts are going to be sent, despite how often we tell them that information. There was a lot of questions about when are the transcripts going to be sent, any reminders or deadlines that are relevant to all of our students. And then the subgroup information is just tailored to whatever the group is. And those groups have changed year to year. And then the other thing you're doing as your lab hours and your outreach are taking place is you have ongoing communication where you are responding to students' emails. So they can come in, they can They can read the outreach information and then they can ask questions. So that didn't take up a lot of time. And when I saw common questions, I would send out an email blast to, the group based on those common themed questions. But they, random questions come up here and there and they need something. The important thing is that we're there for them when they're, their counselors and the other people that they're used to working with aren't necessarily accessible during that time, either because it's a month where they're not working, or like Cathy had mentioned here at Helix, the staff has moved on to working with the 9th graders, so they're not really available for their seniors anymore. So some of those questions they have, we can answer for them. So additional information and suggestions that I had as I was thinking about how to piece together a program is just really looking at the difference between with the lab hours, daytime versus evening. We did try to experiment with evening hours versus in the middle of the day hours. And honestly, I didn't see a huge benefit in moving our hours to the evenings. We thought that perhaps students wouldn't be available during the daytime because a lot of them have jobs, but honestly, I did not see a big difference. Of course, depending on your staffing, you may have to make those adjustments. And maybe you want to offer a little bit of both if you're able to accommodate that. Walk-in assistance is where students can just drop in versus appointments. If you're able to do that, if on your outreach days you want to be available for appointments, so you can plan around that. Some students like that. Some students would request to come in at times that we didn't have lab hours. So we would use our non-walk-in days and create appointments for our students. It was helpful. It wasn't abused or overused in any way, but there were kids that had jobs and they needed to come in during those times. With your outreach hours, definitely you can front load and more hours are needed at the beginning before your program starts. If you plan ahead, I know with Google, you can even create a bunch of emails and then schedule them to be sent out. So you can do a lot of work in the beginning before your program starts. So you probably will need more time at the beginning. And then once the program's up and running, the day-to-day maintenance is not really that extensive. In fact, as the next bullet point says, you're likely going to have downtime while you're having your drop-in hours. So depending on your staffing, you can have some staff assigned to working on emails while others are working with students. It's pretty flexible in that way. It is really important to advertise the program because if students don't know what it is, they're not going to take advantage of it. And especially once the seniors have graduated, they're checked out in many ways of their high school life, but knowing the resources still available to them is important, but it's not going to happen unless you've advertised. I do also recommend, as Cathy mentioned before, creating a separate email account for the program so that it is all centered in one location. This is helpful when you're emailing all your different groups and subgroups. It also gives you some opportunity to store the emails so you're not repeating yourself. If you keep that going year to year, you know what your needs are, you know what common questions have been asked, and you know what to say to your students, which then helps you in moving forward with your outreach in the future. We did always let our students opt out of communication if they wanted to. We would put a little tag at the bottom: if you don't want to receive anything else from us, this is how you can opt out. If you're using your school's email address, if the students still have access to it, the nice thing is it's your email address. So, it's not like their personal address where we're hassling them at home. And I already said that. Okay. I definitely do also recommend gathering necessary resources while you have access to your school. Here at Helix, while the space program was taking place, there was a summer registration program taking place on campus as well. So as a staff member, I could go in and ask questions with a spare minute here or there, and I had access to certain things. But if you're operating this program after the rest of the school is out of session and you don't have access to certain things, it can be problematic. And I'm thinking about like transcripts and that type of thing. So if there's anything that you think you might need and your school is going to close down and you don't have access to it, then you want to try and gather that as much as possible in advance. And that can be anything from just information like dates to actual tangible resources. I'm going to turn it back over to Cathy.
Sorry. So we hope that this has been good information for you, and we're definitely available to answer questions. It's been a learning experience. Katie mentioned about the advertising. When we looked at our data, we did see one year where we definitely had a higher melt. We weren't going down, and what we looked back on is that year, there wasn't a lot of advertising before the kids graduated. So when Katie was sending out the information and stuff, they didn't know what it was, and so they didn't respond. So letting your population know that you're available and where. And I think this is a program that could be done, doesn't have to be an individual site. I think it could be done like within a district and find a common location, like a public library or someplace that's common within that district geography. And then that allows you to draw in more staff and things. So there's lots of ways for these programs to exist. This is just how Helix has done it, and it's worked for us. And we've gotten some really good feedback. Like Katie said, we did an exit survey every time a kid dropped in. We'd ask them to give us information on, how we did and what helped and what didn't, and then we learned from that. So if there's any questions, we're happy to answer them. We know we ended early because that was our intent, was more to make it a conversation.
So if you have any questions, I'm not sure with this, if anybody's able to come off of mute, but if not, you can go ahead and add it to the chat. But we do have a survey. So if you're able to, I know Zarette just put it into the chat, and then you can also take a picture with your cell phone of the QR code, and you can click on that, and then the survey will go right to your phone. But we do really appreciate your feedback. It helps us know in the planning, and it also provides great information for our presenters as well, because we do ask for a nice message to give to them. So they have provided, both Cathy and Katie have provided some great resources for you. They've been doing this a while. So the fact that they've gotten down to a 0% as far as summer melt goes, and I know she's shaking her head going, it's not going to be like that this year. And that's because of a lot of factors with COVID, of course. But still, to be as low of a percentage as they were in the year before is still fantastic. And that's the kind of data our leaders want to see. That's what our administrators want to hear. And if there's a way for school counselors to show accountability to the programs and the services that they provide, this is a huge one. It's a big topic right now because our students are having, and they are struggling with what to do once they hit I accept to a college. As someone who went through this through the parent lens, I thought as a counselor for 20 years at a high school, I had it all figured out until my son went that summertime between high school and college, could not believe all the things that he was being asked to do, that I had to kind of step in and go, what? Because he was asking a lot of questions. And his mom's a school counselor. So and it made me angry because, that was a privilege he had. And all the students that don't have that or don't have access to their school counselors over the summertime, it really does create an issue. And there are lots of things that need to happen, from health waivers to housing contracts, to move-in dates, to orientation. And there's a lot of these things are mandatory. So again, we don't want our kids to miss those deadlines or to miss the opportunity that they worked so hard for when they went to high school. And a lot of that, they just need someone to kind of guide them along the way. So thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Alejandra had a question in the Q&A I want to address. So she was asking if we do things virtually or is it all in person? And prior to 2020, it was all in person, other than email type things. 2021, we did both virtual and in person. And 2022, I'm looking at doing both. I think if students need appointments during non-lab days, it will be virtual, but lab days are in person, and that seems to help them better than virtual. As far as just really being able to sit at a computer, we find the majority of the students, let me step back. Helix used to have the majority of our college-bound students going to four-year colleges and a minority going to community college. Thanks to the promise, which I'm a big fan of, that's flipping around. But even before that, the majority of the students coming into space are community college students, where they don't have an orientation to go to and have somebody help them build their schedule for the fall. They don't know how to work the website, and they just get an email that says, here's your registration date and time, and they don't know what any of that means. So being available to assist them in person seems to be a really strong advantage. So I recommend in person over virtual, but sometimes virtual, we've learned now that sometimes virtual is better than nothing. So thanks for that question, Alejandra.
If any other questions, feel free to ask. I believe, did you both put your email addresses on the slide deck?
I'm not sure if we did, but I will.
Perfect. And then we will be, like I said, posting the recording of this session to our SDCOE school counselor page, as well as this presentation. So you'll have everything in one spot. So, well, I'd like to thank you both. If there aren't any other questions, I would like to thank you both for your time and your expertise and knowledge. I mean, like I said, I have witnessed what you are all doing. I have had interns who have helped serve this program, and they have shared how wonderful it is firsthand working with students, what a great tool it was, and all the fantastic things that you're doing for our students when it's not even time to be at school. You're making it happen and you're making it work. So thank you so much. If you have any other questions, feel free to email them. But I do want to say too that this was our first day of our Spring Refresh series, and we have more workshops coming up. So feel free to click on the calendar and register for more that are there. And then we also have as like our capstone event, our Honoring Excellence in School Counseling Leadership, which is going to happen on May 17th. And I just want to say a little bragging rights for Helix. They were our category 4 champions for the FAFSA CADA submission rate. So they squeaked 1% high of a school that had been getting this award for the last 2 years. So congratulations for having, I think it was like a 76% FAFSA CADA completion rate during a crazy time. So congratulations to all your efforts and all the work that you're doing. We hope that we see you guys that are out there on this workshop at another webinar, and we hope that you take care. Thank you so much.